million suns shine down, but I see only one. When I think I'm over you, I find I've just begun.
All right, hello there, thrill seekers. It's me, and there's Ziggy. Ziggy is in his Marty McFly outfit, which we got him because he seems to be kind of cold lately. We had his hair cut short because he was having a skin condition, and the vet recommended that would be good for a skin condition, but now that it's gotten cold, he's not as furry as he used to be, and so he's shivering some. So we've got him that, and yes, we did check to see if he seems to be in pain or something, and he doesn't seem to be. We're keeping an eye out for that. I think it's just because he's cold, because when we put the Marty McFly jacket on him, he stopped shivering. Okay. The song you heard at the beginning was a piece of the song Benson, Arizona, and it appears at the beginning of the film Dark Star, which I believe was John Carpenter's first movie. I know it was, I'm pretty sure it was his student film that he later expanded and then released commercially, and it's a great song and it's a great movie and you should watch it. So I got a question the other day asking me to comment on a video about the Buddhist concept of the soul, and I don't know how to pronounce the guy's name. I think it's Adam Misnerm. I'll put it on the screen so you can read it and maybe look him up if you want. But let's look at the video first and then I'll comment on it.
Anatta, or anatman, not soul, is an adjective. We must remember that the frame of reference from which you view things is foundational. Now, the frame of reference for all spiritual practice is obviously that there is a spirit soul, something which transcends physicality and transcends death. Without that, spiritual practice becomes nothing but psychology. Now, the Buddha used this adjective, anatta, to describe the five khandhas over and over again. Namely, the body, sensations, perceptions, mental formations, and sense consciousness are anatta, are not soul. In short, the psychophysical, the mind-body process, is not the soul. This points directly at the fact that that which is not the psychophysical is the soul. This is the essential point of the Buddhist teaching, and the essential point of all spiritual practice.
Okay, so there you go. What he's saying is I've talked about this a few times on this video channel, I think. I don't know, my memory's terrible. But it seems to be kind of au courant, as they say in France, these days within Western Buddhist circles, to go around correcting people about the Buddhist concept of anatman, no soul, sometimes no self or no soul, and saying, no, there is a soul, and all the Buddhist teachings are saying is that the five skandhas, form, feeling, perceptions, impulses, consciousness, I can rattle them off a lot faster than that guy, are not the soul, but there really is a soul. And I think he says the foundation of all spiritual practice is the idea of that there's something beyond the psychophysical. I think that's what he says. Something beyond the physical, something that transcends death, and so on and so forth. And that's kind of a strong point with people who get into this. So let's talk about this idea of no soul in Buddhism, and rather than talking about anatman in terms of because sometimes it's translated as no self, let's talk about it in terms of it being no soul. That'll be easier to talk about it that way, but just keep in mind that it is translated both ways. So first of all, we got to ask ourselves, what do we mean by soul? I grew up without any real religious training. I think I had a couple of sessions of Sunday school, and I only know this because there's a photo my dad used to have of me in front of a Sunday school, but I have no recollection of ever going there, so it must not have been very long. So my upbringing was not atheistic, but was sort of agnostic. That's what my dad used to say if anybody asked him about whether he believed in God or not, and he would say he was agnostic. And I think that's probably true of my mom too. So what I learned about the soul, I kind of learned through just just hearing what religious people had to say about it, and so my sense of what a soul is that it was this immaterial something that was the real me that lived inside of my body and was separate from my body. But in order to get it right, I went and looked it up on the internet. And I found a website called gotquestions.org. Got Questions is one word. And it's supposedly a flagship of the website God Questions Ministries, a network of sites with a shared mission to glorify God and reach people for Christ by providing biblical answers to spiritually related questions. We are Christian, evangelical, theologically conservative, and non-denominational. So I think their view, which they explain pretty well, represents, I think, what most Christians think of when they think of the soul. So I'm going to read you bits of it. It says this: "The Bible is not perfectly clear as to the nature of the human soul, but from studying the way the word soul is used in Scripture, we can come to some conclusions. Simply stated, the human soul is that part of a person that is not physical. It is the part of every human being that lasts eternally after the body experiences death. Genesis 35:18 describes the death of Rachel, Jacob's wife, saying she named her son as her soul was departing. From this we know that the soul is different from the body and that it continues to live after physical death. The human soul is central to the personhood of a human being. As George MacDonald said, you don't have a soul, you are a soul, you have a body. In other words, personhood is not based on having a body. A soul is what is required." And then there is this distinction in the Bible between the concept of the heart, the spirit, the mind, and the soul, and this all gets very confusing, and I didn't really understand it, but they kind of turn around and say that in the end the words are kind of used more or less interchangeably in the Bible. But okay, so you got this idea of this something that lives inside of the body and is the actual person and is different from the material body. And the material body is, I don't know if they say this in so many words, but it's basically the material body is a dead thing, and it is given life by the soul, which is the living thing, and the living thing is actually immaterial, and the body is material. Now, if we go to the Bhagavad Gita, and this is the Hare Krishna version of the Bhagavad Gita, so my sense is their translation of the actual scripture is pretty accurate. It's sometimes in their, what they call the purports, which is the guy A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, their leader. That's him giving his opinion on what they mean. Those bits go a little bit astray. But let me read you what they say about this. And this is in chapter 2, starting on text 13 or verse 13. "As the embodied soul continually passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. The self-realized soul is not bewildered at such a change." And skipping ahead, we get, "Know that which pervades the entire body is indestructible. No one is able to destroy the imperishable soul. Only the material body of the indestructible, immeasurable, and eternal living entity, which is the soul, is subject to destruction." And here's a nice key verse. "As a person puts on new garments, giving up old ones, similarly the soul accepts new material bodies, giving up the old and useless ones." So basically, the idea is kind of the same, except that the Hindus believe in reincarnation. And what the Hare Krishnas do very nicely is they give you a little picture to show you what's going on. So this immaterial soul you can see inside this guy's body. And I've talked to Hare Krishnas, and I remember them saying that this is actually where the soul lives. It actually lives in your chest, just like they show it in the pictures. And here you can see that the elephant has a soul, the dog has a soul, so Ziggy has a soul, the cow has a soul, and the people all have souls, or are souls. Sorry about knocking the camera over. that's the idea, and that's the idea that the Buddha was reacting against, I think. The Bhagavad Gita probably existed in the Buddha's time, but probably wasn't exactly the same Bhagavad Gita as what we have today. But I think it's reasonable to assume that those teachings about the soul existed in Buddha's time, the Atman as this thing that lives inside the body and isn't the body, and so on and so forth, even if the Bhagavad Gita didn't really... It probably wasn't in the same form, and it probably wasn't nearly as important back then, but it contains the same teachings, or the teachings are kind of as they are. And here is what I wrote in response to the guy who asked me the question. So I kind of liked my response, and so I'm going to read it to you and then comment on it. So here's what I said. It's all words in the end. The root problem is about how you divide the universe up into various concepts. There are a lot of different ways to divide reality up. It's like if you're cutting a cake. You could cut it in an infinite number of ways, just a normal round, like a birthday cake. Some ways make more practical sense than others. Like if you cut a round cake with a series of straight cuts from one side to the other, some pieces would be really tiny and some pieces would be really big, and that wouldn't be a practical way. So I'm trying to say that my metaphor is a little bit shaky here, but I'm trying to say that there are ways to divide reality up that make sense and ways that don't make sense, but in the end you're just dividing it up. So you want to keep the good ways of dividing reality up and kind of get rid of the bad ways, but also know, well, I'm going to continue. Let's say... Let's read what I said to the guy. Anyway, reality is an undivided whole. Within this whole, there are aspects we call mind and aspects that we call matter. For the sake of conversation, that's fine. The problem is when we think that the slices we've made of reality are intrinsic to reality itself. They aren't. There is no absolute mind or absolute matter. Mind and matter are aspects of the same thing. Separating mind from matter would be sort of like trying to remove the eggs from a cake after it's already been baked. It just can't be done. But you can say that within the cake are eggs, even though they're all mixed up and stuff. Don't try to take this metaphor too far. Reality is not really a cake. So yeah, this, like I said, it's a kind of a shaky metaphor, but I think it gets the job done for the purposes. This is the problem with the concept of soul, and I think the guy in this video may not fully understand this, or maybe he does, but he doesn't seem to be expressing it in this short clip. Sometimes the teaching of Anatman is misunderstood as meaning that there is no non-physical aspect to reality. If you call the non-physical aspect of reality soul, which this guy in the video kind of seems to be doing, then you could say Buddhism accepts the existence of the soul, because it does accept the existence of something other than material reality. But I don't think that's what most people mean when they say soul. They mostly mean that the soul is a non-physical portion of a human being. It's like a little ghost that sits inside the body. The body is a dead material machine, while the soul is the living immaterial driver of the machine. That's what I think most people usually mean. And it kind of reminds me of a TV show that Tsuburaya Productions, where I used to work, made. It was called Jamborg Ace. And in Jamborg Ace, actually, I think they got this idea from a cartoon called Mazinga, but I'm not really sure which one came first. But the idea was taken up by Pacific Rim, the people who made Pacific Rim. When I saw Pacific Rim, I just thought, oh God, this is like a big budget version of Jamborg Ace. Because in Jamborg Ace, you've got this guy who lives inside, or not lives inside, but he goes inside a robot, and he can control this giant robot from inside and make it fight monsters. And I think that's what most people mean when they think of the soul. They think that there is this one singular thing, the actual person, the total personhood of the person, that is an immaterial thing that sits inside the body and controls it. But the Buddhists reject that. And one of the aspects that I think doesn't get enough press when people talk about this idea is one of the problems the Buddhists have with this idea is the idea of a singular one thing. So that's where the guy uses the word khandhas, which is probably the Pali version of skandhas, the form, feeling, perceptions, impulses, consciousness, which I mentioned earlier. These are the 5 things that come together and make up a human being or an animal or a rock or a house or anything. And they are considered to be sort of 5 distinct things. And again, the problem is how you slice up that cake of reality. So in even talking about this, I'm having to switch from various different ways of slicing up reality. And I think every Buddhist who talks about this ends up with the same problem, because there are various ways to slice up reality. And the point is that reality is a unified whole, and you can't slice it up this way. But the idea that there is this one immutable thing that is the real you, the true person. I heard somebody on the internet, I was looking at dumb things on the internet today, talking about expressing your true self, expressing your true personhood or whatever. And that's a big thing these days with people who want to have their various identities and stuff. And that's a problem for philosophically, if you're really going to actually believe in Buddhism, because there just isn't. It's just a flux and a flow of things. The true person changes all the time because it's a mixture of a bunch of different stuff that is the way the Yogacara people deal with this is they postulate that there are the 6 senses. So the 6th sense is not the 6th sense in the like the Bruce Willis movie, like a extra sensory perception or something. The regular 5 senses: seeing, hearing, feeling, smelling, tasting, touching. Is that it? Anyway, whatever they are. And then the 6th one, Ziggy, hang on, let me finish the video. He's warning me about these tree trimmers all day. So, Ziggy, hang on. Anyway, the 6th sense is mind as a sense. So they consider mind to be one of the senses that sort of integrates all the other senses. And then there's even this other thing that the Yogacaras postulate on top of that called manas, which is this sort of, it takes everything from all 6 senses, including the mind, and integrates it and makes it feel like one single object that can move around and do stuff. And that sense of being one single individual thing is useful. It's I don't even need to go into, I hope, all the ways it's useful. I own this house, and I'm the guy who runs this video channel, and we can say that I am something. I am this one thing, and so we do that. But because that is so useful, we get kind of beguiled by it and think that that's the whole story. That there is this one thing that is the me that lives inside of me, and then the theory of the soul is that it is an immaterial substance and so forth that moves everything and is the true me. The true me is the immaterial something that lives inside of me, but the Buddhists don't believe that. Now, to the other guy's point that all of spirituality demands that there be something that transcends the body and transcends death. This gets really tricky. My teacher would probably just put the kibosh on that right there. He'd probably just stomp all over that idea. I'm a little bit more too much of a nice guy sometimes, I think, and I don't put the stomp on that. But I think the way I would prefer to explain it, rather than stomping all over that idea, is to say that, yeah, okay, we can say there is something that transcends the body and transcends death, but it's not that there's a real me that transcends the body and transcends death. It's that our sense of being this body is maybe mistaken. But having said that, I'm hearing the voice of my first teacher yelling at me and saying that, because I had a discussion with him about some of the Hare Krishnas, saying, I am not this body, I am the soul that lives within. And he said, I think to a Buddhist, it's maybe more accurate to say, I am this body. So there you go. Now you got that one to chew on. But And I understand why he said that. I don't know if I understood it then, but I think I understand it now. that doesn't mean that this material universe is the be-all and end-all of everything. The idea I think the Buddhists have is that we are not able to see and hear, feel, etc., perceive with the senses all of reality. And therefore, when we try to think about all of reality, it's based on these incomplete senses, which aren't even sensing the whole picture to begin with. So yeah, there's something beyond all of this, and there's some sort of ground of all being and non-being. This gets, tricky. When you talk about it being beyond being and non-being, you're talking about it's beyond existence or non-existence, which, the human mind has difficulty ever transcending that. You have to think things are either exist or don't exist. How can you have something which is beyond existence and non-existence? And that's what the Buddhists say exists, and a lot of the Hindus say it, and Nisargadatta Maharaj says that all the time too. So yeah, I hope that was thoroughly confusing, because I feel like I got really muddled up, because these kind of things are impossible to talk about without muddling them up. That's kind of the reason that a lot of the Zen school of Buddhism defaults to the idea of we just don't even talk about that stuff. We just don't talk about that. Don't talk about Fight Club. Just don't talk about it. So there you go. That's my response to the video. I hope it was thoroughly confusing. I think I already said that. If you want to donate to me making more confusing videos, you can go to the URL that you're seeing on the screen below, which is hardcorezen.info/donate. That is hardcorezen.info/donate. That's where you'll find my PayPal and Patreon links. And you can also find them below in the description if you're looking at this on YouTube. Those are my main ways of making a living, those donations I get from you, those $1 and $5 donations. So I appreciate your support, but as always, you don't got to support me if you don't want to support me. All right, we will see you next time. Have a good time all the time. Bye. All right, hey, Marty McFly. Do you like your Marty McFly jacket? I think it makes you look like a cute little fluffy Marty McFly. Let's go in and edit the video, all right, Ziggy? We can get away from those wood chopper people. All right. See you later, Ziggs.